Welcome back to The Deep Dive. Today, we are looking at something really fascinating. It's a study in contrast, all focused on one powerful series from, the most recognizable name in guitar effects, BOSS.
That's right.
We're looking at their MD series, but the pedals we're analyzing, the MD2, the MD200, and the MD500, they couldn't be more different.
Not at all. It's a complete spectrum of design philosophy, all under one banner.
Right.
On one end, you have the MD2 Mega Distortion. It's a specialized high-impact analog circuit built for one thing, crushing riffs in a very specific musical era.
And on the other end,
the MD500, a highly complex dual-engine digital workstation it's designed to do every possible modulation effect from the last 40 years. It's the perfect illustration of how one company can tackle the needs of the purist specialist versus the universal sound designer.
Okay, so let's really unpack this monumental contrast. Our source material today breaks down the architecture and the intent behind these three core pedals. We're going to examine the evolution of modern guitar effects from a purpose-built analog circuit all the way up to these 32-bit floating point DSP engines.
And these are built for pristine 96 kilohertz stereo soundscapes and, complex recalibability. It's a different world.
Absolutely.
So the mission for you, the listener, is to get a really quick handle on this evolution. We want to show you the architectural secrets, like the component choices in the MD2 that gave it its voice, and the processing power decisions in the MD500 that let it just absorb effect history.
So it's not just a feature list?
No, not at all. It's about explaining why those features are essential for different kinds of players.
That is a huge conceptual and technological leap to cover in one session. So I think we have to start where the dirt is thickest and the design is most focused.
Yeah, you have to.
We're beginning with the analog specialist, the MD2 Mega Distortion.
Let's do it.
The MD2. It hit the scene around 2001. When you look at the timeline, that was a really pivotal moment in heavy music. What was the context? What created the need for a new kind of distortion?
This was the absolute peak era of, what the source calls Mega Drive. It's specifically tailored for the aesthetics coming out of the late 90s and early 2000s.
We're talking new metal.
New metal, modern metal, down-tuned riffing, and that explosion in popularity of extended range guitars, 7 and 8 strings. The distortion requirements for that sound, they shifted fundamentally away from, traditional high-gain amp tones.
So why did the existing high-gain pedals start to fall short when players started dropping down to, A or B standard tuning?
Well, the problem was twofold. It was about definition and saturation. Traditional high-gain circuits, even really good ones, were voiced for standard tuning.
Right.
So when you drop those super low frequencies into the circuit, the clipping stages would often just turn them into this uncontrolled, indistinct roar.
Yeah.
The signal got muddy. It lacked the percussive attack you needed for fast, tight rhythm work.
So you lose all the punch.
You lose all of it. And on top of that, getting the level of continuous smooth saturation you needed for those really compressed modern leads, it often came at the cost of this horrible high-frequency fizz or harshness.
Okay, so the MD2 wasn't built just for more gain. That's not the point. It was built for
controlled saturation.
Controlled saturation and, crucially, that low-end mass.
Exactly. The low-end emphasis was the non-negotiable part. These new genres, they demanded a distortion that sounded produced right away. It had to maintain that huge low-end mass, the thunder, while staying percussive and tight enough for those rapid, hard-hitting palm mutes.
I see.
The source really emphasizes this was a direct response to the practical difficulty of getting a tight low end without needing, super expensive multi-channel rack gear.
I often hear the MD2 compared to its older, maybe more famous sibling, the MT2 Metal Zone. The source even calls the MD2 the Metal Zone's modern cousin. What's the key philosophical difference in their design?
That comparison is perfect because it really illustrates the shift. The MT2 is famous, or notorious, depending on who you ask for. It's complex, surgical, 3-band parametric EQ.
Right, the EQ is the whole point of that pedal.
It is. That pedal gave you massive control over carving out specific mids, often for that, famous mid-scoop sound. The MT2's focus was surgical frequency manipulation after the clipping stage.
And the MD2?
The MD2 focuses almost entirely on raw saturation and low-end mass. Not surgical EQ. It was about immediate, thick, impactful tone. Its controls are designed to adjust the core feel and density of the distortion, not for minute frequency sculpting.
So it's less about carving and more about building.
That's a great way to put it. It aimed for that compressed, massive sound right out of the box, optimized for that heavy, chugging rhythm player who needed simplicity and just immediate thunder. The MD2 is about density. The MT2 is about defining negative space in the mid-range.
Okay, let's dive into the actual analog guts of this thing. The MD2 is described as an analog multi-stage distortion with pre- and post-gain shaping. When we hear multi-stage, what does that actually mean for getting that high-gain sound?
A multi-stage architecture is really the key to deep saturation in analog circuits. It means the signal passes through multiple independent transistor or op-amp gain sections, and each section contributes a portion of the clipping. So instead of one violent clipping event, you have several cascading gain stages.
And each one is sort of shaping the signal a little bit more.
Precisely. Each one slightly compresses and shapes it.
So what does that cascading approach get you sonically that a single hard clipping stage just doesn't?
It creates a much thicker, more harmonically complex saturation. When you push the signal incrementally like that, each stage introduces its own unique set of clipping harmonics. The resulting harmonic stack is dense, it's smooth, and it's highly compressed, which is exactly why modern metal lids sound so fluid and can sustain for so long. The compression is generated naturally by the cascading gain, not just by slapping a limiter on at the end.
So the pedal's design has these three critical components built around that core engine. What are they, and how do they work together to create that mega distortion signature?
Okay, so first you have the heavy saturated distortion core itself. That's the main engine generating the grit we just talked about.
Right.
Second, there is the dedicated low-frequency enhancement circuitry. This is a very targeted circuit that boosts and shapes the subfrequencies, before or during the clipping stage. It's there to make sure they maintain their size and definition, preventing the bass from getting swamped by all the mid-range clipping.
And the third piece, which seems critical to the pedal's feel.
The third is the separate post-core gain boost stage. This is basically a way to hit the final clipping or compression stages even harder. It's an added layer of controlled saturation designed to push the tone into extreme, almost fuzz-like territory, but without losing the tightness you need for metal.
So the whole point is to deliver an immediate, engineered, produced tone.
Yes. It completely bypasses the need for high-gain preamp tubes and complex cab simulation. You just plug in, and the tone is ready for metal.
The MD2 manages to pack a ton of tonal shaping into just 5 knobs. We've got level, tone, and dist, which are pretty standard. But the magic, as the source material emphasized, is in the bottom and gain boost knobs. Let's analyze that interaction.
This is where the MD2's design genius for its target audience really shines. The traditional controls handle volume, high-frequency presence, and the main clipping level. But if you only had those, you'd just have a standard, albeit powerful distortion.
But the bottom and gain boost are different.
They're dedicated shapers that govern the two most essential elements of modern metal tone: low-end power and dynamic response.
Let's focus on bottom first. It's described as dedicated low-frequency emphasis, crucial for defining whether the tone is a tight thump or a huge wall. How is that different from just turning up the bass knob on my amp?
It's much more targeted. A typical amp EQ often adjusts a really broad range of low frequencies, which can quickly lead to muddiness. The bottom control, though, is often thought of as a dedicated low-frequency shelf or a boost that's centered right around the fundamental frequencies of down-tuned guitars, say 80 hertz and below.
Ah, okay.
Its main job is to dictate the mass and the physicality of the lowest frequencies and make sure that when you palm mute, you get a definitive, controlled thump instead of a flabby, indistinct woof.
So if I move from standard tuning to a 7-string in B standard, I'd use the bottom control to compensate for that fundamental drop without losing the definition.
Precisely. If you're playing into a dark cabinet, you might keep the bottom lower. If you're using a bright combo amp, you dial it up to inject that necessary low-end thunder. It's the essential tool for matching the pedal's very specific sonic profile to the natural response of whatever backline you're using.
It stops the sound from getting either thin or way too boomy.
Exactly. It's the balance knob.
Now, let's tackle the other critical control, gain boost. You said this is an extra layer of gain and saturation on top of the main distortion. I'm really curious about this. Why separate the main clipping control, dist, from this density control, the gain boost? This seems like the core architectural insight here.
This separation is the design genius that solves a really common problem in high-gain circuits: the trade-off between clipping and feel.
Okay, explain that.
When you have only one gain knob, Turning it up increases both the clipping and the compression at the same time. So if you want maximum sustain, you have to accept maximum clipping, which often just destroys the dynamic feel and makes the tone sound flat and one-dimensional.
I see. So how does the MD2 get around that?
By separating dist and gain boost, the player gets two independent axes of control. The dist knob sets the foundational grit, the amount of initial clipping and breakup, which defines the overall texture.
Okay.
The gain boost knob, however, primarily dictates how dense, smooth, and compressed that clipped signal becomes. It influences the sustain and the attack envelope.
That is fascinating. So a player can set the amount of crunch they want with dist and then use gain boost to decide how much the sound glues together and sustains independent of that initial breakup level.
You've got it. You can run high dist with low gain boost for a gritty, articulate, slightly dynamic, heavy crunch. Or conversely, you can run low dist with high gain boost for a smooth, hyper-compressed lead tone that just sustains forever, even if the primary distortion texture is pretty moderate.
So it gives you way more flexibility.
Far beyond what a single gain control could ever offer. It optimizes the pedal for both rhythm density and lead fluidity, all without having to change pedals.
Let's put all these controls together and define the final sonic profile of the MD2.
The profile is aggressive, saturated, and highly compressed. It's built for impact. It has that massive low end. But crucially, the compression keeps it tighter than most traditional fuzz pedals, or even a lot of modified amp distortions.
What about the mids and highs?
The mids are deliberately focused. Not overly scooped, but shaped to punch through a mix. And the high frequencies are bright enough to cut without being piercing, largely thanks to that smoothing effect from the gain boost layer. Sustained notes are just fluid because the multi-stage clipping ensures you get consistent harmonic feedback.
Okay, let's break down the tonal scaling. What does a low to mid setting give us?
If you run low dist and low gain boost, you get what the source calls a hot-rodded crunch. It's still heavy, much thicker and more compressed than a classic overdrive, but it keeps enough clarity and attack for things that need high gain but less density, maybe heavier rock or some mid-tempo punk.
It's still fundamentally modern, though.
Oh, absolutely. It's not going to sound like a low-gain tube amp, not even close.
Now for the bread and butter. That sweet spot for the early 2000s metal rhythm tone.
That's achieved with mid-dist and mid-to-high gain boost. This setting is the MD2's signature voice. The compression is optimized, so the initial transient of the pick is extremely defined, that concrete thump that characterizes hard-hitting palm mutes.
And the chord itself.
The sustained part of the chord just roars with harmonic density. This is its core use case, delivering optimized rhythm tracks for down-tuned metal.
And what if we max everything out? High dist, high gain boost.
That's where you maximize the sustain and harmonic saturation. You're entering a territory that borders on a high compression fuzz. The goal here is fluid leads that seem to stretch into infinity, or for generating those huge thick walls of drone and texture you hear in atmospheric metal.
So dynamics are pretty much gone at that point.
Almost non-existent, yeah. But the trade-off is maximum fluidity and sustained energy.
We mentioned earlier that its specialized low-end circuitry makes it viable for bass. Can you elaborate on that a bit?
Yes, it's a very practical application. Standard guitar distortions, they often filter out too much low frequency or just turn the low end into an unusable mush of square wave clipping when you put a bass through them. But because the MD2 has that dedicated bottom control that shapes and enhances the sub-frequencies before the main clipping stage, a bassist can add that aggressive grind or distortion layer to their signal without completely sacrificing the low fundamental frequency.
So it adds dirt without losing the core of the bass tone.
Exactly. It does require careful management of that bottom control to make sure the tone doesn't get overbearing, but for certain genres, it can be highly effective.
It's clear the MD2 is an incredibly effective tool for a very specific purpose. Let's sum up the pros and then talk about the inevitable trade-offs that come with such a focused analog design.
The advantages are significant. You get immediate, complex produced metal tones right out of the box. That combination of multi-stage clipping and the bottom control is a massive technical advantage for tailoring the sound to different amps and critically different tunings. And the separate gain boost offers true rhythm lead flexibility in one pedal.
But the core consideration, which you highlighted, is that consequence of high compression versus dynamics.
The high compression is both its strength and its weakness. I mean, if you're a player whose technique relies on subtle pick dynamics, where hitting the strings harder changes the sound from clean to dirty, the MD2 will feel unresponsive and just closed off.
It's not for that kind of player.
Not at all. The source is absolutely correct. This pedal is explicitly not suited for dynamic players, vintage rock, or those low-gain edge-of-breakup sounds that prize clarity and touch sensitivity. It's a compressor and a distortion rolled into one hypersaturated machine.
And what about the practical challenge of that powerful bottom control?
Well, while it's the solution to low-end definition, it can be its downfall if you misuse it. If you crank the bottom control into a dark, large cabinet, the sound can become disastrously boomy, undefined, and just overpowering.
So you have to be careful.
You have to be diligent. You have to actively manage that low-end focus, especially when you're moving between different venues or amps, because its purpose-built power makes it pretty unforgiving if it's not balanced correctly.
That was a deep and focused dive into the MD2, a real testament to high-impact analog specialization. It was designed to solve a very specific problem in the evolution of metal.
Yeah, a real problem solver pedal.
But now we make a radical philosophical pivot. We're moving from the MD2 to the MD200 and MD500. We're shifting from a highly specialized analog circuit to highly versatile digital processors designed to cover an entire category of effects: modulation.
This is a huge leap, both technologically and conceptually. The design goal for the MD2 was perfection within a very narrow scope. The goal for the MD200 and MD500 is perfection across a broad scope,
Right.
achieving studio-grade versions of chorus, flanger, phaser, tremolo, rotary, all with digital precision, stereo imaging, and most importantly, recallability. We're moving from tweaking clipping diodes and capacitor values to manipulating digital signal processing architecture.
The idea that one manufacturer excels at both of these extremes, the purpose-built analog dirt box and the hi-fi digital workstation, is just fascinating.
It speaks to their engineering depth. And this digital transition introduces us to the concept of the BFS 200 series. The MD200, along with the other 200 series pedals, it represents a kind of mid-sized paradigm.
Okay, what's the philosophy there?
The philosophy is critical. Deliver the core, studio-quality sound engine of the flagship 500 series, which is the absolute maximum, but in a smaller, more pedalboard-friendly footprint. And with a simplified but still deep control set, it's all about optimizing that feature-to-size ratio.
Let's start with the MD200, which is categorized as a multi-algorithm modulation processor. When we talk about high-fidelity digital processing in this context, what are the key tech specs that give it its sound quality?
The MD200 really doesn't cut corners on a core engine. It runs on a powerful 32-bit floating point DSP. That architecture is crucial for handling the immense dynamic range you need for high-fidelity audio.
But there's another spec that really elevates it.
Yes, the spec that truly elevates it above cheaper digital units is the 96 kilohertz sampling rate.
Okay, let's unpack that. Why is 96 kilohertz so important for modulation effects specifically?
Well, traditional digital guitar pedals often sample at 44.1 or 48 kilohertz. And while that's sufficient for recording, when you start manipulating the signal with complex time-based effects like chorus and flanger, which rely on precise, short delays and feedback, those lower sample rates can introduce digital artifacts.
Like what?
The higher 96 kilohertz rate provides superior handling of high-frequency harmonics, and critically, it increases the available headroom, which dramatically minimizes the type of distortion called aliasing noise.
Aliasing noise. That's that unpleasant kind of metallic or fizzy sound you sometimes hear in cheap digital effects, especially when the modulation sweep is fast.
Precisely. By basically doubling the sample rate, the MD200 provides a cleaner, more pristine high end. That's essential for a digital shimmer chorus or complex flanger sounds. The high-quality AD and DA conversion just ensures the integrity of your original tone is maintained. So even though it's a compact unit, it brings studio-grade performance to the stage.
And what are the standout features that make it a compact workhorse?
Beyond the 12 deep modulation algorithms, the key features are just practical for the modern player. 4 onboard presets with easy switching, which is expandable via MIDI full, MIDI in-out for external control, and flexible routing. It truly is designed to be the nexus of modulation on a mid-sized board, and it carries the flagship DNA of the MD500.
As we discussed earlier, the central challenge for any multi-effects pedal is how to provide deep functionality without needing a massive box. How does the MD200 solve this user interface problem with its compact controls?
The solution is all about efficiency and implementing smart multifunction controls. While the MD500 relies on a big LCD screen, the MD200 uses dedicated knobs for the core stuff: rate, depth, and effect level.
But for the deeper settings.
So access those deeper settings, it employs those 3 additional assignable parameter knobs.
So these 3 knobs change their function entirely depending on the mode you've selected. Can you give us an example?
Sure, if you select the vibrato mode, those three assignable knobs might control parameters like LFO wave shape, pitch offset, and maybe a high-cut filter. But if you switch to the rotary speaker effect, those same three knobs might transform into controls for horn acceleration, bass rotor speed, and mic distance simulation.
I see.
This design allows them to cram a high degree of detailed functionality, all these subparameters, into a small space without forcing the user to constantly navigate deep menus for every single adjustment.
And the I/O has clearly moved into the professional realm compared to the MD2.
Oh, absolutely essential. It has full stereo in-out. If you're using a dual amp setup or recording tracks in a DW, this is just non-negotiable for maximizing the spread and immersion of modulation effects.
And the MIDI.
The full MIDI I/O allows for clock synchronization, making sure your tremolo is perfectly in time with the drummer, and for receiving program change messages to recall presets remotely. Plus, that expression cradle jack lets you do real-time manipulation of any parameter, like foot-controlled Leslie speedup.
With 12 algorithms, the MD200 is aiming for comprehensive coverage. What defines the range, and more importantly, the specific tonal quality that its 96 kilohertz engine delivers?
The range is exhaustive. It covers everything you'd expect. Chorus, flanger, phaser, tremolo, vibrato, univibe style effects, rotary, ring mod, and that rhythmic slicer effect. The tone is really defined by its clean, hi-fi quality and its immense flexibility. It can do the deep, warm swirling of an analog chorus, but also the pristine, crystalline shimmer of digital rack gear.
All because of that processing headroom.
Exactly. But the feeling, the connection to the instrument, that's crucial. And this is where the analog drive-through architecture becomes essential. Let's fully define that concept and explain why it is so critical for a digital modulation pedal.
Okay.
This is a huge architectural decision that impacts feel and sound integrity. Modulation effects work by mixing a dry signal with a slightly delayed or phase-shifted wet signal. In cheaper digital units, the dry signal also has to go through the AD and DA converters.
And that causes problems.
It introduces two problems. First, latency, even if it's minimal, and second, phase shift caused by the conversion process.
And what's the sonic consequence of that digital dry-through phase shift?
The moment the dry and wet signals are even slightly out of phase, they cause cancellation at certain frequencies, which can lead to a noticeable tonal thinning. The signal just loses its body and power.
And analog dry-through solves this how?
It solves this by keeping the unprocessed dry guitar signal completely in the analog realm. It bypasses all the digital conversion. Only the wet signal gets processed digitally, and then they're mixed back together right at the output.
So by ensuring the dry signal has zero latency and zero phase shift, the MD200 guarantees that the player's immediate connection to their amp is preserved, and the core tone maintains its thickness even with heavy modulation.
Absolutely. It preserves the feel and natural bandwidth of your instrument. That is a massive pro when you're trying to integrate a digital pedal into an otherwise analog chain.
So given its feature set, who is the ideal user for the MD200?
This is the perfect tool for the compact board where space is limited, but high audio quality is not compromised player. It's for musicians who realize they need access to 4 or 5 different modulation types in a single set list, but just can't sacrifice a huge amount of real estate.
I can see that.
It's highly favored by session musicians who need immediate access to a range of pristine stereo effects with preset recall for different studio demands. We also see it a lot with ambient and especially worship players.
Why them specifically?
Well, they might need a pristine wide chorus for a verse, then switch immediately to a pulsing slow tremolo for a bridge, and then engage a rotary speaker simulation for a lead line, all within one song, and all recallable via preset or MIDI sync.
And its neutral full-range response means it appeals beyond just guitarists.
Correct. That 96 kilohertz high-fidelity engine means it doesn't just sound good with a guitar's limited frequency range.
Yeah.
It's equally potent for processing bass, keyboards, and synthesizers, where its clean, wide bandwidth allows the effects to breathe without introducing unwanted noise or aliasing. It's a truly versatile sound tool.
The MD200 offers MD500 DNA in a smaller package. But where does the compromise lie when you compare it to the flagship?
The pros are huge. You get the MD500 sound quality, MIDI, analog drive-through, and a vast range in a manageable box. The trade-off, however, is almost entirely centered on the depth of control and immediate accessibility to all the parameters.
You mentioned the multifunction controls are clever, but they must still require some form of menu diving compared to a pedal with dedicated knobs for everything.
They absolutely do. while the 3 assignable knobs reduce menu interaction for the most common subparameters. If you want to dial in a truly esoteric setting like customizing the LFO wave shape with precision or applying a specific low-cut filter to the wet signal, you have to enter the menu system.
So it's more for setting up sounds beforehand.
It requires more setup time than the MD500. It's a necessary consideration. It's not for the player who needs maximum customization on the fly without looking at a screen. And as we said, it's absolute overkill for the player who only needs one basic modulation effect.
We've moved from the high-gain specialist, the MD2, to the compact hi-fi solution, the MD200. Now we arrive at the flagship, the MD500 Modulation. You called this a workstation. When we use that term, what kind of performance promise are we making to the user?
A workstation implies zero compromise. It promises maximum processing power, unconstrained flexibility, and the ability to replace an entire row of vintage pedals or complex rack gear.
It's the top of the line.
It is. The MD500 is part of Boss's 500 series, which represents the pinnacle of your compact digital processing. It's designed for the professional environment where fidelity, recall, and complex routing possibilities are absolute must-haves.
The promise, as the source materials state, is that if you needed only one modulation box for the rest of your career, this would be the solution.
That's because it's designed to consolidate history and future-proof functionality at the same time. It has a massive library of algorithms, including those meticulous recreations of classic bias effects, along with deep, almost overwhelming editing capabilities.
But there's one feature that truly separates it from the MD200.
And from most competitors, yes. It's the architecture that's designed to run multiple effects simultaneously.
Let's highlight the dual-engine design. This is the MD500's primary differentiator and the key to its immense power. How exactly are these two engines organized?
The MD500 houses 2 completely independent modulation processing engines. We call them Engine A and Engine B. The crucial point here is that each engine can access and run any algorithm in the pedal's entire library. And they both operate off the same ultra-high-resolution 32-bit 96 kHz DSP platform.
So it's truly like having 2 individual high-end modulation pedals in one box.
That's a great way to think of it. 2 pedals sharing the same pristine clock source.
This moves beyond just stacking effects serially. The power lies in the routing flexibility. Let's delve into the 3 primary ways these engines can be connected.
The routing options are what transform the MD500 from a dual-effect pedal into a sonic sound design tool. First, the simplest is series routing, so A runs into B. This is useful for traditional stacking, like running a gentle phaser into a deep chorus for a compound swirling effect.
Okay, simple enough. The next option is parallel.
In parallel routing, both Engine A and Engine B get the dry signal at the same time. They process it independently, and then their wet outputs are mixed together with the dry signal at the end.
Why would you do that?
It's essential for creating thick, layered effects that don't compound compression or filter characteristics. For instance, you could run a subtle tremolo on Engine A and a wide ambient rotary speaker on Engine B. The 2 effects blend together without altering each other's internal dynamics.
And the most complex option, A-B split or insert-style routing, that opens up entire rig possibilities.
Absolutely. The A-B split function lets you use the MD500 with your amp's effects loop, or even with 2 different amps. For example, you could run Engine A, maybe a clean phaser, into the front of your amp, and then plays Engine B, like a chorus, in the amp's effects loop.
So it handles modulation both pre- and post-preamp gain stages.
Exactly. It mimics complex multi-device rig setups entirely within one box. This level of routing precision is why it earns that workstation title.
If the MD200 requires some menu navigation, the MD500 must require a doctoral degree in sound design. How does the interface manage all this complexity?
The interface is dominated by the large LCD screen, which is necessary because the parameter set is just so massive. It uses dedicated knobs for the immediate core settings rate, depth, EFX level, but then uses the screen and dedicated soft buttons to navigate the truly deep menus. The depth of editing is exhaustive. It's designed for the player who wants granular control over every single aspect of the effect.
What specifically can be tailored in those deep editing menus that the MD200 just can't touch?
You can tailor almost everything. For each patch, you can customize the LFO wave shape sign, triangle, square, random, even custom shape set precise tempo mapping, apply per patch EQ to shape the affected frequencies, and even adjust parameters like damping or friction for simulations like the rotary effect.
So you can sculpt the sound far beyond generic settings.
Oh, absolutely.
The source material mentions the algorithms aren't just generic types. They are authentic recreations of classic BOSS modulation pedals. That's a massive historical feat.
It is a critical feature. The MD500 is not just modern, it's a history box. It includes meticulously modeled versions of classics like the CE1 Chorus Ensemble, the original Warm Bucket Brigade Chorus, and the Dimension D.
The Dimension D is famous for creating width without obvious pitch shifting.
Right, it uses complex phasing networks to do that.
So what's the challenge in modeling something like a CE1 or a Dimension D within a modern DSP? It can't just be the modulation itself.
You're right. The challenge isn't just mimicking the pitch modulation, it's capturing the sonic characteristics of the ancillary analog circuitry. The CE1, for instance, had a distinct analog preamp that colored the sound, even when it was bypassed. The MD500's modeling has to accurately recreate that specific filtering, compression, and high-frequency roll-off inherent in the vintage analog circuits.
Which is a significant computational task.
It is. And by consolidating these classic flavors, the MD500 offers a single platform that represents decades of Bosch-esque design history, side by side with modern hi-fi clarity.
Given its target audience of touring pros and studios, the MD500's integration has to be seamless. What defines its I/O ecosystem?
Integration is absolute. It has full MIDI in, out, and through, allowing it to be the center of a synchronized rig. You can use external foot controllers or DAWs to send program change messages to recall specific patches, or continuous control messages to manipulate any parameter rate, depth, feedback, and real-time automation.
And the USB port.
The USB port is vital for computer-based editor and librarian functions, which makes managing hundreds of presets much more efficient, and for critical firmware updates. And of course, it retains the expression creel jacks for physical control. But the real professional feature for live performance is how it manages presets.
We talk about hundreds of presets. What feature ensures that switching between them doesn't disrupt the flow of a performance?
That would be the patch spillover feature. When you switch patches, this feature allows the decay or trail of the currently active effect to fade out naturally rather than cutting off abruptly. If you're using a long ambient reverb or a deep chorus, the transition is smooth, musical, and professional. It eliminates those awkward silences or jarring transitions that plagued earlier digital multi-effects.
It makes it reliable for the most demanding live scenarios.
Absolutely.
To summarize the flagship, what are its clear advantages, and what are the realities of owning such a complex piece of equipment?
The advantages are unparalleled. The dual engines unlock sonic combinations that are simply impossible with single effects. It covers the entire spectrum of modulation, from vintage warmth to modern pristine clarity, and the extensive MIDI and preset support mean it fits flawlessly into professional automated systems.
But I have to bring up the critique of complexity. You called the MD500 the command center, but doesn't the sheer size and the need for a big LCD screen for deep editing, doesn't that fundamentally clash with the spontaneous, tactile nature of a traditional guitarist's workflow?
That is its main consideration, and it's a fair critique. The MD500 is not a spontaneous tool, it is a sound design tool. The learning curve is substantial, and the sheer volume of menus and options can easily overwhelm the casual user.
It's a commitment.
It requires dedication to unlock its full potential. Furthermore, its larger footprint means it demands significant real estate on a pedal board. The source is absolutely clear. If you are a plug-and-play musician who only needs one basic, always-on flange sound, the MD500 is extreme, unnecessary overkill. Its power necessitates complexity, and that defines its target user.
We have completed the journey across the MD series spectrum, from the focused analog fury of the MD2 to the unconstrained digital complexity of the MD500. Let's try to synthesize these design philosophies for the listener using a concrete analogy.
Yeah, if we view the MD series as different tools in an audio engineer's toolkit, the contrast becomes really sharp and illustrative of their intent.
Okay, let's start with the MD2.
The MD2 Mega Distortion is the analog shotgun. It's purpose-built, optimized for maximum impact and velocity in one direction, delivering that crushing, saturated, modern, high-gain tone. It is uncomplicated in its aim and incredibly powerful within its specific genre niche.
Then you have the MD200 modulation, which serves as the digital Swiss Army knife.
Exactly. It's compact, yet it's engineered to cover the entire breadth of modulation tasks at a professional standard. It expertly balances those high-fidelity features, like the 96 kHz processing and analog drive-through, providing versatility and recalibability in a size that's manageable for almost any gigging board.
And finally, the MD500 modulation is the digital command center.
Right. This offers maximum power, the deepest customization via its dual engines and complex routing, and it's designed to replace an entire rack or a whole collection of specialized pedals. It's the platform for the player who prioritizes complex sonic architecture and recallable precision over tactile spontaneity.
This contrast really highlights how a manufacturer like BiSS manages to serve multiple, often contradictory, segments of the musician market at the same time. What are the core design intents underpinning each approach?
Well, the design intent for the MD2 was entirely about immediate, crushing, genre-specific tone. The controls disc, gain boost, bottom, they were tailored to remove complexity from achieving that massive low-end saturation. It focused the player entirely on feel and density, not frequency analysis. It was built for speed and impact.
Then the MD200.
The MD200's design intent was professional accessibility. It leverages the top-tier tech of the 500 series, like that 96 kilohertz engine, and combines it with practical features like presets and MIDI, all scaled to a pedalboard-friendly format. The goal was to provide high-quality sonic breadth without the crippling complexity or physical size of a flagship unit.
And the MD500 was clearly designed without any constraints on features or processing.
Precisely. The intent for the MD500 was unconstrained control. The dual-engine architecture and exhaustive editing capabilities were included to cater to the expert user or studio environment that needs the confidence that every historical or future modulation permutation is achievable, predictable, and fully recallable within their system.
So after analyzing this whole spectrum, what's the key takeaway about effects, manufacturing, and innovation that the MD series demonstrates?
I think the most important takeaway is that innovation in this field isn't just a linear march toward digital complexity. Specialized effects and complex multiprocessors are developed simultaneously because they meet fundamentally different professional demands.
Right.
The market requires both the purest solution, the player who demands one specific highly tuned analog flavor, like the MD2's focus saturation, and the sound designer solution, the player who requires infinite modulation permutations and digital precision, like the MD500. The MD series illustrates that successful design often involves perfecting a narrow task, like the MD2, just as much as it involves consolidating every historical possibility into a digital platform, like the MD500. The contrast shows that the focus can be on capturing a transient cultural aesthetic through analog circuitry or achieving future-proofed flexibility through computational audio.
It's the ultimate reflection of the musician's decision-making process. Do I choose the perfect tool for one specific job or the versatile tool that covers everything with precision?
Exactly. And the MD series gives the musician high-quality options across that entire continuum.
That brings us to the conclusion of this deep dive into the BLSS MD series. We began in the early 2000s with the MD2, studying how a specialized analog multi-stage architecture was engineered with those critical bottom and gain boost controls to meet the specific demands of high saturation and extended range guitars.
We then traversed the technological leap to the MD200, which provided that high-fidelity 96 kHz processing and analog drive-through technology in a compact, practical format, making it the perfect nexus for a modern pedal board.
And finally, the MD500.
Right. The MD500 showcased the ultimate expression of control through its dual-engine flexible routing system, capable of running complex multi-mod combinations and recalling decades of classic BOS modulation history, all in a single workstation.
It's a powerful showcase of the engineering adaptability required to dominate the effects market.
Indeed. And this raises an important question for you, the listener, to mull over as you think about the future of tone crafting. Since the MD500 effectively consolidates decades of modulation history, and the MD2 defined the specific sonic demands of the early 21st century high-gain landscape, what technological frontier do you think the next generation of MD series pedals will be built to capture? Will it be further, deeper integration with computational audio that models the relationship between effects and room acoustics? Or will it be a return to perfecting a single, yet-to-be-defined analog flavor for a niche subgenre that hasn't even emerged yet?